Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing another movie review. This movie is a drama slash science fiction movie from Russia, Russian language English subs, released in the year 2013, directed by Alexei German, and this film is called Hard to be a God. So Hard to be a God is set with some scientists that travel to another planet, and when they get to the planet they realise it's just like Earth except it's 800 years previous, so they're in the medieval ages. Now these scientists, they can't intervene with anything, they've just got to observe life. And so there's a lot of injustices that happen here, and the further they study this civilization, the more they struggle to just observe. They want to actually intervene to try and right the wrongs, but it's something that they just can't do. So whether or not they can hold and just observe is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Hard to be a God. I love European cinema, and so you guys know that, and so for that reason I really wanted to watch this film. This is a movie that comes with incredible hype. They say it's one of the greatest films ever made. Alexei German was a brilliant director, and so I hadn't heard of this guy, and I definitely needed to see this film. So with expectations really high, I was hoping that I was going to get an absolute masterpiece, but unfortunately at the end of the day I will say this is one of the most interesting movies ever made, but it's also one of the most boring films ever made, which is something I'll go into a little bit later. But what I loved about Hard to be a God was the fact that it was so interesting, is that you've got a director who unfortunately died before he could actually finish this epic movie, and so his son took over towards the end and he actually completed it. But the interesting aspect of Alexei German's outlook in this film was, what is this movie about? This is a lot of ambiguity to the movie. It doesn't follow a generic sort of formula as far as storytelling is concerned, which makes it very interesting, but it's also a negative that I have of the film, which I'll go into a little bit later. But the beauty of this movie is that it is a repulsive film, it's an extreme film, and it's a very cruel and depressing movie. It's a movie that doesn't have any outlook at life in a very bright way. And so I kept thinking to myself, is this Alexei German's way of looking at the world? Is this emphasizing how he feels as a person? Was he depressed? And is this an idea of what the future is going to be like because we treat each other badly? And so there's a lot of ambiguity and there's a lot of grey area in this movie that's going to create a lot of discussion, and ultimately in a film you want discussion, and I think this movie will provoke a lot of discussion. So it's incredibly interesting, and it makes it, as I said, one of the most incredibly interesting films that I had seen. And so I thought, well, that is going to definitely it's the type of film that a lot of people are going to study for film class. It's definitely a prime example of a movie that can be put up and can be looked at, and a lot of people can draw their own conclusions. And so I thought that was just incredibly fascinating, and these are questions that probably won't be answered in black and white because, unfortunately, as I said, the director has passed away. And so it does leave the question, is what is going through this director's head as he's making this movie? It is very different. And so I had a lot of ideas as I was watching it, not just watching it as far as the story is concerned, but watching it through the perspective of the director and what is going on with this guy. And so it does hit you on levels that are very strange and very different from other films that you'll see as far as generic storytelling is concerned. So that was very interesting. And then you've also got, on a visual base, an absolute masterpiece. As far as atmosphere is concerned, this is one of the best atmospheres that I have ever experienced. This is a movie that is shot in black and white, and that emphasizes the cruelty and the dirtiness that the movie has. This is one of the most disgusting movies I have ever seen. You've got excessive gore, you've got people blowing snot out of their nose, you've got people coughing, snorting, spitting, you've got people who are wiping their feces on their face, you've got people who are touching dogs in very inappropriate ways, you've got men who are touching women in very inappropriate ways, and there is no love in the film whatsoever. There's animal cruelty, there's gore, there's disembowelments, there's people ripping each other's eyes out, tongues are being ripped out, just absolutely awful things. And at the end of the film I thought, oh well, while I was watching the movie I thought, I'm going to contract coronavirus watching this movie because everyone's coughing, and I was just in an environment that was incredibly disgusting, repulsive, ugly. And once again, it made me start to think, is this Alexei German's outlook in life? Was he depressed? And so, because it's so disgusting, so cruel, there's a lot of mud, there's, as I said, a lot of dirtiness, a lot of people are coughing, and it's just an absolutely horrible feeling that the atmosphere has. And the atmosphere, I just thought, absolutely hit you over the head with a sledgehammer. I think it's one of the best atmospheres that I have come across as far as a horror movie is concerned. This is not billed as a horror film, but it had that horror feel. And so I just thought, wow, this is a movie you definitely have to have a shower after watching. So be very careful if not into extreme cinema. This is a movie that is going to repulse you on so many levels. You've got acting that I thought was actually different, was actually quite decent. I thought the script was incredibly interesting once again. And you've just got moments that are very bizarre and very out of this world. And I just thought to myself, okay, well, visually I am incredibly impressed. But unfortunately, as far as the story is concerned, yes, it does bring out a lot of ambiguity. Yes, it does bring out a lot of discussion. But for 3 hours, this movie goes for 3 hours, or 10 minutes shy of 3 hours. For 3 hours, you need a story that continues to evolve. But this movie just doesn't evolve. It's from the first minute to the last minute, you're in no better place. It's basically just this set in this castle-like environment, and you've got these peasants who are being treated horribly by the richer people. This is a movie that will bring a discussion about society and how society treats each other, how one human can treat another human so terribly. And once again, maybe this is the director's outlook in life in the future because of how badly we treat each other. Who knows? Maybe we'll end up like this. You've also got that the hard to be a god aspect is that a lot of people say, if God exists, why does he do bad things? And ultimately, maybe these scientists are that God, and they can only observe. And so when they see all these horrible injustices, yes, we'll like to correct the wrongs, but if you can't do it, you just have to observe, and how hard it can be to observe that aspect. But unfortunately, not only is it hard to be a god, it's hard to watch this movie. And so you've got a film that just goes around in circles, basically not elevating itself. It's not really a thrilling film, and it's just a movie that just goes through the motions for 3 hours. Is that visually it can take you so far, but for a 3-hour film, I want something a little bit more. It is good to be different. It is good to be European. It's good to be art house, but there does come a point where you go from art house to pretentious. And this movie really does go down a pretentious road. And by the 2-hour mark, I was looking at my watch. I wanted to turn this film off. I felt as though I couldn't get through it, but I always watch a movie in its entire runtime at once. I never like to turn it off and then resume later on because, yeah, you kind of take yourself out of the experience. But unfortunately, I just didn't really care for the experience. I just thought it was incredibly monotonous. Now, yes, once again, that may have been the entire point. It may have deliberately been an exhausting film, but for me, as I said, that pretentious quality, there is a difference between art house and pretentious. Art house is creating something on a very high skill level, and it's something different. But then when you're being pretentious, it feels like you're showing off. And I thought as though this director was showing off the fact that visually this is absolutely brilliant. But unfortunately, as far as content is concerned, it's just one of the most difficult films to get through. And so I wanted to love this movie, but if I'm being serious, I just couldn't get into it. I just thought to myself, yes, visually it was outstanding, interesting as far as its concepts are concerned. It's going to create a lot of discussion, but unfortunately by the end of it, you're just glad it's finished. It's just a movie where humans are being horrible to each other. It's disgusting. Some bodily fluids. You've got women being treated horribly, dogs being treated horribly. Be careful if you're an animal lover, because there is animal cruelty in this movie. But it's just the whole thing just reeks of throwing visuals at you, throwing horrible people doing horrible things. Yes, we get the point. Humans can be terrible to each other, but it doesn't follow a particular story. It's just basically people going around saying horrible things to each other. Then it's the next scene. Then it's the next scene. Then it's just horrible, horrible, horrible. You'll feel depressed after watching it, but unfortunately you'll feel exhausted for all the wrong reasons. And that to me is why I just didn't love this movie as much as others. So each to their own. If you are a die-hard art house European film fan, then maybe you'll get something out of it more than I did. But for me, if I'm being brutally honest, I love these types of different films, but I just thought this movie was way too long, and it was kind of full of itself. And it pains me to say it because I wanted to love it, but unfortunately I just didn't. So overall, for Hard to Be a God, not coming recommended, only to very acquired film fans. I'm only going to give this one 2 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you there.